yatina basvati tatra vayur gandhavayo grano nasi drikasataha nasike nira vidyetam dodhu yatini basvati tatra vayur gandhavayo grano nasi drikasataha
Sikena Bidyetam Tadhu Yatina Basvati Tatravayu Gandhavaho Grano Nasijagrikshatah
Nasikenera bidyetam Dodhuyati nabasvati Tatravayorgantavaho Prano nasi jigrikshataha.
Shri Shri Gauranitai ki jai.
Nasike nirabhidyetam Dodhuyati nabhasvati Tatra vayur gandhavaho Grano nasi jigrikshataha.
Nasike nirabidyetam
Nasike viravidyetam
Dodhu yatina basvati
Nodho yatina basvati
Tatra vayor gandhavaho
Gandhavaho
Grano nasi jighrikshatah.
Ano nasi jigrikshataha
Vidyetam
Nasike viravidyetam
Doduyati Nabasvati
Dodho yatina basvati
Tatravayor Gandhavaho Grano Nasi Jigrikshataha.
Nasike nirabhidyetam Dodhu yatina basvati Tatravayu gandhavaho Grano nasi jigrikshataha.
Asike nirabidyetam Doduyati nabasvati Tatravaya gandhavaho Grano nasi jigrikshataha.
Nasike nirabhidyetam
Nasike
Dodhuyati nabhasvati Tatra vayor gandhavaho Grano nasi jigrikshataha.
Nasike in the nostrils Nirabhidyetam being developed Dodhuyati rapidly blowing Nabhasvati air respiration Tatra thereupon Vayuhu air Gandha Varaha smelling odor Granaha sense of smell Nasi in the nose Jitrika Sataha desiring to smell odors. Translation and purport given by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Thereafter, when the Supreme Purusha desired to smell odors, the nostrils and respiration were generated. The nasal instrument and odors came into existence, and the controlling deity of air, carrying smell, also became manifested. Purport: the nasal instrument, odor, and the controlling deity of air, smelling, etc., all became manifested simultaneously when the Lord desired to smell. The Vedic mantras confirm the statement in the Upanishads statement that everything is first desired by the Supreme before the subordinate living entity can act upon it. The living entity can see only when the Lord sees. The living entity can smell when the Lord smells, and so on. The idea is that the living entity cannot do anything independently. He can simply think of doing something independently, but he cannot act independently. This independence in thinking is there by the grace of the Lord, but the thinking can be given shape by the grace of the Lord. And therefore, the common saying is that man proposes and God disposes. The whole explanation is on the subject of the absolute dependence of the living entities and absolute independence of the Supreme Lord. Less intelligent persons, claiming to be on an equal level with God, must first prove themselves to be absolute and independent, and then they must substantiate their claim to being one with God. Guru Maharaj, we would love to hear your comments on Srimad Bhagavatam. Om Jnana Dhyandasya Ananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So this part of Srimad Bhagavatam is explaining how everything is coming from and beginning from the Supreme Person, who is Krishna. And a person has one characteristic of having desires. Every person has some kind of desire. So Srila Prabhupada, he helped us understand that it is not just my own desires, but there is also a Supreme Person who also has desires. And this is generally not accepted by the people in the material world today. Generally, if you ask somebody, even if they're a religious man or a pious man, they will give you some impersonal interpretation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead that we know as Krishna. So, this impersonalism is so embedded in today's society. We should always be thinking that we're not so far from actually falling back into this impersonalistic way of life, because it's everything that we're seeing. It's in society so heavily. So Prabhupada, he makes the point that when somebody seriously takes the path up of personalism, it is actually pretty rare that they fall down into the impersonalistic view and concept of worshiping God. And in the other hand, in the other way around, the impersonalists, a lot of times they are pursued or swayed, their opinion may be swayed from this impersonalistic view to the personalistic view. And we see this, Lord Chaitanya gives us an example of this when he converted the Mayavadis into personalists. And we see a very prominent example in Srimad Bhagavatam where 4 impersonalists, very famous impersonalists, became personalists. Can anybody remember who these 4 people are? Yes, Rishi Kumar Prabhu, the 4 Kumaras. And the 4 Kumaras, How did they become personalists? They desired, here we have it, to smell. They smelled the tulsi leaves that were offered to the Lord. His lotus feet mixed with sandalwood pulp. And me, when we taste the tulsi that is offered to the Lord's lotus feet that is mixed with sandalwood, we might be reminded of Krishna in some way. But what is really going on is we're tasting tulsi mixed with sandalwood. Whereas Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains that the four Kumaras, they were very, very elevated yogis. Very, very elevated. So their senses were of such, where when they smelled those tulsi leaves that were offered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, it was as if they were smelling with their entire body. Their senses were so strong, they were on such a pure level that they didn't just smell tulsi, they didn't just taste tulsi and smell sandalwood, but they actually experienced God. And this is described how the very elevated Vaishnava experiences everything in this material world, because he knows that everything is connected with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, if you look at this chapter, that's exactly what it's doing. It's connecting everything with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It's showing us that every way that we can possibly experience the world is connected with the Supreme Person. They talked about the eyes being connected with the Supreme Person, the hearing, the sense of taste, the sense of smell. All of these things have their origin because the Supreme Person desired to have them first, and therefore he provided for the other living entities to also have. We experience through the different sense organs, and there's a presiding deity for each one of these senses, and he appointed a person, a demigod, in charge of that specific function of the sense. So this chapter it's connecting so many different things on a personal level, in a personal aspect. The scientists, they can explain how the nose works and how the sense of touch works and how the eyes can see. But the difference of the explanations is there's no person behind their explanation. So when there is no person behind the explanation, it becomes willless. There's no will. If there's no person, there's no one willing that to happen. You see, it's a dead end. If there's no will, then what's the point? This is the conclusion that the impersonalists come to. Everything is one. What is the point of taking bath? What is the point of keeping clean? What is the point of going to the temple if everything is one? So this Krishna consciousness system that is given by our acharyas is just that. It's a very nice example of this chapter that we're hearing in Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam. We can connect every single thing with Krishna. That is what the process is simply showing us how to do, right? Even something like using the bathroom. When a devotee wakes up in the morning, he's waking up for Krishna. He wakes up at the time so he can go and see Krishna. And what does he do after he arises? After he wakes from rest? He knows the process of sleeping contaminates the body. So he goes and he takes bath. And there's even a system to taking your bath. First, you pass urine or stool. And you know, from the Vedas, once you do that, all the holes of your body become contaminated. So you wash all the different holes of your body. You wash your mouth out. You go and take your bath. And then we get out of the bath and we say mantras to purify the subtle body. And then after that, we put on tilak, marking the body with all the different names of God. And after that, we go into our service for serving the Supreme Person. And why are we doing this? Why are we bathing? Because we want to keep clean? No. Because we don't want to present ourselves in front of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in a contaminated state. It's not a matter of what I want to do. It's a matter of pleasing the Lord. So the system of Krishna consciousness is aligning every single thing in our life. So nothing is breaking our meditation on the Supreme Person. And if we're having our meditation broken on the Supreme Person, we should take note. What is this that is breaking my meditation? And we should note it. And the next time that thing comes, we should have a plan. Okay? This difficulty came up in my service. It broke my meditation on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So next time we don't have key wicks in the morning, I'll be able to move on with my service and not waste time in my mind that, we actually don't have ghee right now, can't make wicks. So this is a very nice and helpful system for actually ridding oneself from the different anarthas that Krishna gives us the intelligence to see that we have. An aparad is anything that brings you away from your devotion from Krishna. So all of these different things that come up on the mental platform during our day that are breaking our meditation on the Supreme Person are aparad. We need to work on it. Even, on a mental level. So this Krishna is showing us exactly that he is the supreme enjoyer, Purusha. Krishna is the person who is meant to enjoy. And in fact, Krishna has so much happiness, so much bliss, and so much enjoyment that he can share it unlimitedly with all the living entities. But Krishna makes a deal with us. If you try to enjoy this separate from me, I'm actually not going to give you this happiness, this real enjoyment, this bliss. It's a pretty simple deal. Krishna is the source of happiness, ability in man, intelligence. Everything is there already that Krishna has. So it's just a matter of how Krishna conscious are we for him to give us the intelligence that is already there. Because it's not us. We're just acting as a mere instrument of our spiritual master. Just serving the servant of the servant. Das anu das. So, we're dealing with this society where the sacredness is lost completely. And Krishna consciousness is reintroducing the sacred. The society is in a completely diseased condition as of now. And it is our job to try to save those who have been given the intelligence to realize that it's a dead end. You know, what did Lord Chaitanya instruct Nityananda Prabhu and Haridas Thakur, Radha Damodar?
Polo Krishna, Bhaja Krishna, Koro Krishna Shiksha. Basically means chant Krishna, worship Krishna, and teach Krishna.
So these were the instructions that he gave to some of his two most elevated associates. I want you to go door to door today, and I want you to tell everyone that you meet, worship Krishna, give everything to Krishna, make Krishna your whole world. And come back when the day is done and report to me. So they carried out the order of their spiritual master, and they came back, and they told the Lord, only the saintly people wanted to hear from us. Everyone else was calling us rogues and thieves. And all of the devotees that were present had a big smile on their face for the efforts of going out and preaching this movement. This is all we can really say, because somebody cannot receive instruction if they're envious and if they are not dealing with you on a platform of friend. Just like in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says to Arjuna, I instructed this supreme science to you. Why? Because you're not envious of me. And because you're my friend. If those two things are not present, we cannot help each other grow in Krishna consciousness. Shri Shri Gaur Nitai Ki Jai. So often Srila Prabhupada, he highlights all of the very, very basic points in our Vaishnava philosophy, because he was reaching the Western world. He wanted to make sure that everyone got the basics right, so that nobody jumped the gun. You know, Bhaktivinoda Thakur in Sharanagati, the very first song, he mentions the 6 principles of surrender that we should be following. These are basic things of how a devotee bases his life. Daina, Atmani Vedana, Gopi Treva Varna. We should be humble. We should be always thinking of the self, always situated in the self. He says, Krishnaya Prastive, Krishna Vishvasha Palana. One should always have dependence on Krishna. Know that he's completely dependent on Krishna. He's not independent in any way. Every ability that Krishna is giving you is only coming from the mercy of the spiritual master, only coming from serving him on a pure level. He only gives us intelligence through these means. Of course, we're not on a pure level completely by any means. Prabhupada, he would often refer to the type of purity I'm speaking of in this regard. He would often refer to everyone in the ISKCON movement as pure devotees. He asks, how many people are in the movement? These are pure. So this is the level of purity I'm talking about. Because of course there is perfect, like Prabhupada explains, and then there is more perfect. And the variegatedness of the perfection ranges from how much association you actually get with Krishna. And the gopis are getting unlimitedly purified by the association of Krishna. They are the most pure. And who are we ever to think that we're advanced to be in these material bodies? If we didn't have prime examples of those who are advanced, we might think we're advanced. But we know We have so many examples of what the advanced Vaishnavas are like. And guess what? They don't have material bodies, most of them. Completely spiritual bodies. We still have material bodies, like Mangadari was saying last night. Therefore, why we can't think of ourselves as advanced. But the devotee, only the devotee can actually know where he's at in regards to his Krishna consciousness, because nobody else knows how much he's thinking of Krishna besides him and Krishna. And if it's in relation to the service of the spiritual master and the disciple, then Krishna will give the knowledge to the spiritual master to know how much his disciple is thinking of Krishna. Otherwise, it's not that, that information is provided so very easily. It's just between those two. That's the only person who knows every thought that you're thinking. Unless, it's required for service, then the intelligence is provided to the spiritual master. Otherwise. So, we know that this chapter is trying to show us how to relate to God with each of these different sensory organs in everything, really. Everything we do. For instance, prasadam. A devotee should get to a point where he will not even put anything past his lips without it being prasadam. And this is this is a basic principle. This is basic. We see more elevated causes of this, like Raghunath Goswami, I believe, or Radhanath Das Goswami. Yes, he was offered some buttermilk, and they said, "Will you take this buttermilk prasadam?" And he said, "Where is this buttermilk prasadam from?" He said, "Well, we offered it to Krishna over there in this nearby village." And he knew that nearby village is the village of one of Radharani's enemies. How can I ever take buttermilk that is offered in a village of one of Radha's enemies? So he would not take any prasadam unless it was directly offered to Radharani herself. You see, this is a little elevated level of honoring prasadam. Doing something that is not just, okay, there's this regulation I have to follow, even though I actually have all these desires to not, take other things. No. Why would anyone have any desire to take anything else but Krishna prasadam? Well, the only reason is due to ignorance, because they feel like they want to enjoy separately from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That's the whole reason why we're here. Envy and ignorance. We were envious. We wanted to say, why is he enjoying? Let me try to enjoy separate. And then, we become ignorant and we take something that is not offered to Krishna first. But with knowledge, we will never do this again. And the knowledge is, in Scripture it states, as soon as somebody takes anything that is not offered to Krishna, his consciousness becomes completely contaminated. He's not able to think of Krishna anymore. So if the devotee is on a safeguard, where he's thinking about what is interrupting my meditation on Krishna, then why in the world would he want to honor anything but Krishna Prasad? So we covered the two needs of the body, right? We covered eating, and we covered cleanliness, bathing, sleep. The devotee, he takes as much rest that he needs for his service. A good gauge that you can use, that I heard, is as soon as you start acting out of character, as soon as there's some kind of offense, you need to actually, to keep yourself in balance, you have to check, did I take sufficient prasad, and am I in a place where I'm resting, I'm rested. If that is not the case, then as soon as you're finished with your services, you should catch up on a little rest that day. If your service does not require you to communicate with other devotees and you're tired, are you putting the bodily needs first, or are you putting your service first? If you don't need to communicate with devotees at all to do your service, and you can do your service perfectly fine without creating any offenses, are you going to go and worry about your body, or are you going to go and worry about your service? Are you going to worry about the thing that brings you eternal spiritual advancement, or are you going to worry about the thing that just, is giving me a little temporary trouble on this day-to-day basis? Completely nonsensical, like just this little trouble that my mind is giving me. So that's how we can keep our, one way to keep those things in line, So it seems that we have about 5 minutes left. Does anyone have any comments or questions or corrections on this verse we covered? Yeah, Rishi Kumar, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. I was wondering, throughout the class, you were mentioning our meditation on Krishna throughout the day. So if anything, you're saying like if anything interrupts our meditation on Krishna, then we can take note of it for next time. So I'm wondering what you mean by that meditation on Krishna. Like if it means like chanting or thinking of him, his form, or
Yeah, you got it. You got it. Yeah, chanting, thinking of his form, his pastimes, anything in relation to the service of him, thinking of his devotees, thinking of his entourage, thinking of him. If one is heard sufficiently, then everything will remind him of Krishna. Because there's so much about Krishna. The spiritual world the material world is a perverted reflection of the spiritual world. So everything in this material world we can use as a vehicle to remember Krishna in some way. And the prime way that Mahaprabhu gave us is to chant the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. And hearing sufficiently is also very important, because in this Kali Yuga our voices may not be so strong, if we're chanting 24/7. So we can use so many different things to remind us of Krishna or Prabhupada. There's so many pastimes of Srila Prabhupada that are recorded. He's the most well-documented saintly person in all of history. He was in the material world, dealing with so many things. There's probably a story for every single thing. You can connect just back to Prabhupada alone. What's to say about Krishna, So everything in the material world, we should train our mind to use everything in the material world as a reminder of the Supreme Personality of God. Okay? No more questions or comments? Yeah, Radha Damodar Prabhu.
When I was the temple next to my house growing up, there was always like some problems with the management, and there was never like a steady temple president, and nobody ever wanted to be temple president. And so I was just wondering, like if a devotee is like satisfied in his engagement, but out of need he's got to renounce that engagement and take up a different service, but he doesn't actually do that, what is his fate?
Well, the first-class servant, he does what is needed. But at the same time, one can use their intelligence to see if is this the most favorable for my Krishna consciousness. And that's all the spiritual master wants, is to do what is most favorable for his disciples' Krishna consciousness. No? So the devotee will use his best discrimination in this regard, and what matters is that we're thinking about Krishna. That's what's going to give us more service. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Shri Shri Gaur Nitai ki jai.